Welcome to Sage Advice. I'm your host, Rivka Rivera, and today we have a very special guest, Andy Ostroy. Andy is a filmmaker who most recently directed the documentary Adrienne about his late wife, Adrienne Shelly. Adrienne, which can be seen on HBO MAX, is a beautiful and moving film about the actress, writer, director, mother, and wife who starred in more than 20 movies giving voice to strong women. She wrote and directed the Sundance hit Waitress, which is now also a Broadway hit, and sadly, she would not live to see the film's release, her life being cut short by her murder. The film is a celebration of her life and a family's exploration of grief. And in addition to his filmmaking, Andy is also the founder and executive director of the Adrienne Shelly Foundation, which supports women filmmakers with grants, scholarships, finishing funds, and living stipends. So, welcome, Andy. We're so happy to have you here and to talk to you about this beautiful film. Just get started with when did the idea for this film come to you?
Well, I had started writing a book about the same themes, and because I had much more exposure to and experience with, and a familiarity with writing, and so that's where I naturally defaulted to. And I was sort of halfway into it, and I had taken Adrienne's mom and Sophie to see the musical Waitress. And before the curtain went up, she and a few women from out of town started talking. And eventually it came out that Adrienne had something to do with this show. My mother-in-law didn't quite get specific, but she said, my daughter, she had, this is her thing. And one of the women said, oh, that's great. Is she here tonight? And that's when I realized that, there are people that just probably sitting in this theater of 1,000, 1,100 people that don't know who Adrienne is, don't know what happened to her, don't know any of the backstory. And at the time, that it sort of irked me, and it triggered the decision to stop writing a book and to make a film, because Adrienne was a filmmaker, and I thought, if I'm going to do something to bring her back and show the world who she is, then it should be in the medium that she traveled in, of which I had zero experience in. So it was a decision that once I convinced myself to do it, I then got a little petrified because I didn't know the next steps, really. I mean, I wasn't a filmmaker, and I wasn't. I really didn't. I didn't work in that area, and so. But then I started talking to friends and people in the industry, other filmmakers and lawyers, and I just, quite frankly, asked them, like, am I crazy to do this? And some people who I really respect said, not at all, and you're probably the only one that could and should do it. Because it was a story that was so personal and so specific in my vision for it, that it would be very hard to let someone else who's a terrific director with a strong vision take over. And I wouldn't want to, as someone who does run a foundation that supports women filmmakers, I wouldn't want to have that kind of conflict where my vision might be at odds with the vision of a director. And so it was scary, but, the older you get in this world, the more experience you start layering on top of other experience. And, you start to feel like there are things you can do, even though you don't have specific experience. I ran a business for 20 years. I directed things and I directed people. Doesn't make me a film director, but I had some exposure to putting a team together, to having a vision for something, to executing, having people who I could trust to help me execute that vision. Same as starting a nonprofit. I didn't have charitable experience. I didn't run a nonprofit, never worked in a nonprofit. I also never went to business school. I didn't have business experience that way. So I think, so I started to tell myself it's more about vision and an ability to hire and attract the right people to help execute that vision than it is having years of film school experience and learning which lens is better than what other lens, and how to make a movie. And that's not to discount the expertise of people who are doing this for a living. It's just that, everybody's no one's a filmmaker until they make their first film, right? So everyone who makes movies is a first-time filmmaker at some point. So I
And
gave myself that freedom and flexibility to explore that as a new director.
well, and I certainly feel like that was one of the most wonderful things I got from watching the film about Adrienne's message was jump in and do it. I mean, that was like such a that was very clear in the film. This amazing woman just gave, believed in her stories, believed in what she was doing in a world that wasn't believing in female filmmakers. And she jumped in and did it. And that message was very clear and is very inspiring to myself as an artist. So I'm so grateful that I'd seen this film. It was just very moving. You spoke about vision. I'm curious what was your vision at the top when you first started making the film? Did it change? Did it transform as you were making it? I'm always curious, especially the documentary film where there isn't necessarily a script and you are also the subject of this movie, so I'm imagining you're discovering things as you move through. Did you find that the vision shifted over time?
Well, the vision stayed pretty constant, and it was, it's that's why I felt I could make this movie, because it was so overpoweringly clear to me from the get-go. It was to bring her back to life, make audiences know her, fall in love with her, grieve her loss, humanize her for people, humanize her for the guy who killed her, find out what really happened the day she died, because we didn't really know the real truth of what happened that day, and show how a family navigates through that odyssey of grief that comes from this kind of tragedy. And so that was always the basic framework. I kind of had the beginning from the get-go. I kind of had the end from the get-go. Felt where I thought it would travel through the mid parts, which is where a lot of the creativity came, and also a lot of the challenge in weaving. You had a biographical film, you had a family story, you had a love story, and you also had some elements of true crime. So having to weave all that together in a way that not only didn't make people feel like they were on a roller coaster, but also set the movie off on the right track, that 5 minutes in or 10 minutes in, people wouldn't be thinking they're going to be watching a whodunit or a classic A&E type biography story, and that was really challenging. And that's what took a lot of time in the edit, to just get like the first 12 minutes down so that it told enough about everything, but highlighted what is the real story that people are going to be seeing. And so, yeah, the vision never really wavered. Some of the middle parts, and tweaks to the beginning and tweaks to the end. But I always could close my eyes and see the film. And, it was my life, my story, Adrienne's life, her story, and my family's life and story. And so it was all in here. And so just, if I wasn't able to have had that kind of linear vision for it in a way, I probably wouldn't have made the film. And I'm happy to say that, I'm surrounded with great people who got the vision from the get-go, helped execute on that vision, really deferred, provided great input where needed. And the finished product is exactly what I envisioned. I mean, the film accomplishes everything I set out to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting having seen the film and then hearing you state that vision and how clear. I wouldn't necessarily have even, now you said, I'm like, it's all those genres, but I think you really achieved that seamlessness masterfully, of going between the storylines. And
Yeah,
that's,
well, I had two editors that I worked with, one that finished the film with me, and it's great editing. I mean, a film is like any other thing that launches, whether it's a business or a charity or anything. I mean, it's never just one person. And, with a film, editing is critical. And
Yeah.
so I had editors who also understood the vision and were able to take their own sensibilities and use that to help execute that vision. And so I think it was brilliantly edited. I was very involved in that process, but it was also, a lot of times relying on the instincts and the and in a way a vision of the editors too, on some level, to how to weave this stuff in, how to jump back and forth, how to know when to land on certain things, when to have the right musical hits, things like that. There's so much. I mean, I learned so much about making a film. And I think the biggest thing I learned was just to appreciate a second. you know and when you live your life watching movies, you go to a movie and you see something for 90 minutes or an hour and a half, 2 hours. You walk out and it's like, oh, it was good, it was bad, I like the acting, I didn't like the acting. But once you make a film, you have such an appreciation for every little detail. And the smallest detail of a film are frames, like actual seconds. And so it's easy when you start to go, oh, it's this, that, it's just another 8 seconds or a minute. What's a minute? A minute longer than, what. And then once you start really getting down to a fine cut, and you're dealing in minutes and seconds, and then you start pulling out seconds from a scene, and you realize, wow, just taking out 3 seconds just changed that whole scene. And then you're like, a second. I mean, I would have conversations with my editor, just like, just take a second out or add a second back in, and it would change everything, where they would suggest something like that. Let's give it another beat, and so that was really eye-opening, to just see things through the lens of just timing. And that's what I think we accomplished really well with the film, is that it moves very well.
Yeah.
There's never a point where it's like, honey, I'm going to go grab a sandwich. I'll be back in a second, and like, I'm not going to miss anything. Because a lot of documentaries, they do get into such nitty gritty, and it's a lot of verite, and you're like, all right, they're sitting and they're having dinner, and there's no interviews. It's just like a scene, verite scene. Like, I can get up and I can go get a glass of water right now. I'm not going to miss anything. Like, our film had so much to accomplish
Yeah.
in such a short amount of time, that there was no room. So every second literally did count.
I mean, it definitely flows. There's a lot in there. One of the most compelling aspects for me was the relationship between yourself and Sophie, and how you had the transcription from your conversations when she was very young, and then animated that section, which I loved. Was that always part of the vision? Did you know you had that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, that was always there. I mean, I would just remember having these chats with her when she was so little, and thinking, my God, these are incredible. And she was such an expressive, articulate kid at an early age. And I realize that now, and I literally see that, like, this is a conversation I had with her when she was 2 3/4.
Yeah.
And she's speaking in like conversational dialogue. And it's like, you know, it was crazy. And so I knew it in the moment that someday, on some level, she and I will probably want to revisit these. And so I had instinctually, I just was like, I gotta memorialize these somehow. And I had this little BlackBerry, and I had the keyboard memorized, and I would just look at her, and my big daddy's listening. He's just typing. You're going to want to see this someday. And I thought maybe I'd put it in a book or something, or just, give it to her and just say, hey, this is what you thought about all of this for like 10 years, as your mind and maturity developed, because that's the real interesting, fascinating part, is that you see her go from these like abstract conversations about giving mommy chicken and making her better, and to like, okay, who killed her? What did he do? Are you ever going to go to prison to see him? And so animating them was a way to create footage that I didn't have. All I had was text. So I felt cinematically that would add to the film. The truth is not everybody's into animations. If you line up 100 people in the film industry, 50 will probably tell you they hate animations and recreations, and 50 will tell you they're amazing. But I didn't really care. I knew how it would look. I knew that the key would not be animations or no animations, but where to place the animations. Where would they land? And some had more natural landing spots than a couple of the others, and that took time to figure that out. But I wanted it very minimal. I didn't want a lot of things happening. I just wanted a father and a daughter and this powerful dialogue and just the starkness of it to recreate just the heaviness and the sadness of what actually was transpiring in those moments.
How much was she involved in the making of the film? I know she's in it, but how much input did she have, and what was her experience watching the completed film?
She
As
was.
much as you can speak for her.
What's that?
As much as you can speak for her.
Right. She was very involved in the making of it. In fact, she's credited 3 times. She did additional camera work. She did behind the scenes photography. She was a PA. And she was a very willing participant, and she opened up in ways that I thought was not only interesting for the film, but more so as her father, in ways that were good for her, because she's telling you, I don't get emotional, I don't cry, I don't, and then we watch her, we see her arc in the film and how her narrative is first established, and then how it travels through the film, and when she finally saw like a fine cut, she got like maybe we could take that line out that I said, I don't really like that or whatever. And so there was a couple of minor edits that I did to make her feel good about what was up there, because she was a teenager, and teenagers walk around in a haze of self-consciousness anyway on a good day, right? So I didn't want her, especially with something like this, to feel uncomfortable. And so when she finally saw like the final cut or the second cut before that, she was very emotional. And when she saw it like as a movie, not like in a rough cut stage, because she saw that too. But and she said it's great, and she was crying and said, I'm very proud of you, Dad. And and so I felt good about that, because that's one of the reasons I made this film, is to give her this gift that she will always have. I mean, to be able to just sit down for 100 minutes at any point in her life, and as she changes and matures, she'll view this story of her life, not the movie per se, but the death of her mother, growing up without a mother. All that's going to be viewed in so many different ways as her emotional state and maturity changes. It's just like when you're a little kid and you have baseball heroes and they're like larger than life, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, I could be that guy's dad, and it's like the perspective changes as as everything shifts. So right now she's a teenager watching this movie and reliving the story, and then she's going to be older, and so one day she'll be 40, and how she'll look at it is going to be totally different. So she'll always have it and always be able to be with her mom that day and remember what life was like a bit, without her, and how she was as a young woman, as a child, so she was really, she was very, and with kids, they like something when they start Instagramming it, so when so the first time I saw like an Instagram story with something about the film, I was like, ooh, she likes it.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, because if they don't like something, it is not going on their social media.
The story is canned. Yeah. Well, it's no more HBO deal. It's off the market.
Exactly.
Well, that is wonderful. And I want to ask you as well about the foundation that you run and the work that you're doing there. The foundation was formed before the film?
Yeah, no, that foundation was legally formed, I think 3 weeks after Adrienne died.
Wow.
Yeah, because people were asking me like, where can I send money? And they were doing that pretty early on. And you know, I couldn't think, you know, and I said, just wait. I'll let you know soon, but I just can't. And I didn't want to be flippant and like say like, oh, just send it to Save the Whales or wherever. I
Yeah.
wanted it to be meaningful in what Adrienne represented and what her life was and what she would have wanted. And then one day I woke up and I was like, she was a struggling artist, a filmmaker who struggled to get funding to make independent films. And that's who I should be helping in her name and in her honor. And I had no idea that organizations like ours existed. So I just assumed that, it's needed, which it is, even though there are other organizations. And so I quickly formed it and people started donating right away. And we gave out our first grant through Columbia University in May of 2007, which was 7 months after Adrienne died. And then one of our early grant recipients, Cynthia Wade, the following year won an Academy Award for her short film, Free Held, which we helped fund.
Oh, yeah.
So in
Wow.
our second year, we had funded a short film, which won an Oscar. And if you go to our website, you'll see a letter from Cynthia that says, I couldn't have made this film without the help from the Adrienne Shelly Foundation. So we quickly knew that we were going to have impact. And now it's over 100 grant recipients. Most famously, Chloe Zhao, who just won Best Director, she received a grant from us in 2012 when she was making short films and in development with her first feature. So it's been amazing. And we have an incredible board, an advisory board, and we've done benefits and auctions, usually once a year or once every 2 or 3 years. And going on this is our 15th year.
Wow. That's incredible. So is there a next film for you?
I have some ideas, and I mean, right now and I, I'm so happy to kind of have nothing to do right now because it was so draining for 4 years.
Wow.
I don't know if I'd say that if it wasn't such a personal, emotional story, but maybe I would. But the thing about filmmaking, and I always understood this from Adrienne, is that it's same as starting a business, except it's a short-term, compacted business. It has all the elements of business: startup costs, hiring, firing, a vision, everything that happens in a regular marketing company, except it's done in a very short window of time. That's what makes it crazy, because from start to finish, you're executing and finishing in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and so the pacing is different. It's often not like, oh, 5, 6 o'clock, I'm going to go home now, and oh, it's the weekend. It's just constant. And so for me, because it was such a personal story, and I had to go back and relive really horrible things and dredge up emotions that I had tucked away in a fairly safe place in the recent years. By the time it was done, it's been kind of nice to just sort of sit and contemplate or declutter my living room or whatever it is I want to do. But I've had ideas in my head for a few months that I've started to reach out to people who would be the subjects of these possible documentaries. And so who knows? I mean, I love the process of making a film, and I learned a lot about it. And there are things I would do so differently, just because I was thrown to the wolves and had to learn quickly about certain things. And so I feel like if where I am at now, if I had another strong vision for something, which I do, and I'm a better filmmaker, And it's not about leaving my insides on the floor.
Yeah.
That might be a really fun experience and valuable one, because it's hard to sort of conceptualize making a film that I'm not personally connected to, because I've only made one and I've been connected to it in a personal way, in a major way. So like, just a cause that I believe in, or some other situation that's similar to mine and my family, but just not one of my loved ones, it'd be a whole different experience. I've been working since I'm 12, so I'm sure I'm going to be doing something like that again soon. But right now it's just nice to kind of give myself, it's been, 2 months since the film premiered on HBO. So, and in the middle of that has been holidays and Omicron. And so it's like, it's been nuts. Like life has been crazy for everyone. But for me, it's just, it's right now I'm starting to reflect on other things that I might want to do.
Awesome. And my final question, because we have a lot of filmmakers in our foundation at the Florence Belsky Foundation, for anyone who wants to take the jump, who has a story that they're like, it sounds like you have this, it sounds like if you hadn't acted on this vision, it was so strong that it would be something you would be holding in and it wouldn't be healthy. That like you felt the strong need to act on this vision. How do you take care of yourself at the same time so that you can also be the person in charge running this small business?
That's a really good question. I think you have to have a really strong vision. And then you also have to appreciate, I was going to say accept, but it's really appreciate that you're not going to do it alone. And you have to have people that could not just help you get it off the ground in terms of, funding, which is a huge thing. But every step of the way, and you have to have a confidence to be able in every step of the way, say to yourself, that's advice I'm not going to take because that's not my vision. Or, wow, I didn't think of that. It's not something I really intended, but that makes a lot of sense. And I'm actually going to change my mind on that. And that for me was like a big thing, to just be open to certain things that I had been previously married to, but was able to see, that's kind of what I was saying before. In running a business, I had 80 employees at one point, and there were a lot of things that we ended up doing that either I didn't know at a certain point, or I wasn't involved in, or that initially weren't things that I would have done. But you sit in a room with people and you challenge them and they come up with ideas, and you ask them to substantiate why they're thinking that. And if it makes sense, you have to be able to see that it makes sense. You can't just say no, because it's, that's not my idea, and sometimes you want to do that. And sometimes you do that. And if you work with good people, they'll be like, okay, let's continue the conversation and just talk through it, and you have to be able to sort of process that. And, in all honesty, with a story that's so personal, it's harder to do that because you feel like, this is my story. I gotta tell it my way. But you can tell it your way. There's a whole movie, right? And that's the vision of a movie. But all the things in between, this instead of going this way can maybe go that way, and or take a left instead of a right. And you have to be able to see that. And then once in a while, there might be something that's big, and you have to be able to see that for what it is too, and say, these are people who I should trust because this is what they do. And so, I approached the film and really tried to approach the film the same way I had done it when I started a business or when I started a foundation. The first thing I did was put together a board of, directors and lawyers and publicists and people who knew filmmaking and I didn't know, I just didn't know anything about filmmaking, and I didn't know anything about running a nonprofit. So I relied on those people, and I tried to do that. With making a film, it's a little different because ultimately, when it's on a screen, it's the director who either gets the thumbs up or gets trashed.
Yeah.
So, and with this story, it would even the risk was even greater. Like I always said to myself, you don't want to see the reviews that say, why did this guy do this? Like, why did, she had a great legacy until he came along. Like,
Oh
I did
gosh.
not want to see that. And thankfully, the reviews were amazing. And the New York Times called it a gem. And so, and that's the part I was saying, like, you get to a certain age in your life and you have accomplished certain things, you should have a certain confidence level that can almost give you the fuel you need to try anything. As long as you continue to surround yourself with good people who will help execute. And I think so for people who are thinking of doing this, the first thing is just vision. Without if you have no vision but a great team and a lot of money, you're going to make a shitty movie. If you have a great vision but no team and no experience and no money, you can find those things, because those people and those things will be attracted to your vision. And they'll see that there's a movie that I want to be involved with. I want to fund this movie. I want to help produce this movie. I want to get involved. And so everything starts with the vision. With a documentary, and I think with a narrative film, is everything starts with the script. So it's kind of like you said before, docs don't have a script per se, but the equivalent is just a vision where you can say, okay, this is the film that I see. We'll change some things obviously along the way, but that's the movie I see. And then when you can describe that to someone in an elevator pitch, they're either going to get it or they're not. And so you have to have that vision. So if you have a strong vision, just try to find the people that you can convince to help you make it happen.
Wow. That's awesome. That's great advice. Very inspiring. Well, thank you so much. We'll definitely link to the film for anyone who hasn't seen it, and also link to the foundation for people who want to keep abreast of all the amazing things you're doing.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thanks
All
again
right.
for this.